You weren't supposed to be here. Not really. Not according to the timeline you were on 3 weeks ago. Not according to the version of reality that your unconscious breathing was maintaining. But something shifted. Maybe you saw 3:33 on your clock for the 7th time this month. Maybe you woke at exactly 4:44 a.m. with an inexplicable urgency. Maybe someone mentioned breathing in a conversation, and the word landed differently, heavier, more charged, like it was wrapped in static electricity. Or maybe you simply felt it, that pull, that whisper underneath the noise of your thoughts that said, "Look here, this matters. This is for you. Let me tell you what just happened." You didn't find this video. The field found you through it. And the fact that you're still here, reading these words, listening to this voice, means something has already recognized you. Something in the architecture of reality has marked you as ready. Not chosen in some ego-gratifying way, but ready, permeable, beginning to remember. Do you know what you've been doing every single second since you were born? You've been breathing. Automatic. Unconscious. A rhythm so natural you forgot it was there. 15,000 breaths a day. 5.5 million breaths a year. And in every single one of those breaths, you were collapsing a wave function. You were observing reality into existence. You were voting, unconsciously, for the timeline you're in. But here's what they never told you, what the ancient schools kept hidden in their inner chambers, what Thoth encoded in emerald frequencies. Your breath is not just biology. It's quantum observation technology. Every inhale is an act of selection. Every exhale is a release of probability. You are not breathing air, you are breathing reality itself into form. And the version of you that doesn't know this creates a very different world than the version of you that does. This is not metaphor. This is mechanism. Right now, in this moment, your breathing pattern is maintaining a specific frequency signature. It's broadcasting who you think you are to the field. It's keeping you locked into particular probability paths. It's making certain synchronicities invisible while making others glow. And the truly shocking part? You've been doing this your entire life without knowing it. The ancient mystics knew. The temple initiates in Chem knew. The Hermetic schools encoded it. The yogis mapped it. The Taoists refined it. They called it different names. Pranayama, Qigong, the breath of the gods, the wind of becoming. But they were all pointing at the same quantum truth. When you become conscious of your breath, you become conscious of your role as observer. And when you become conscious as observer, reality reorganizes around you. This video is not entertainment. It's not content. It's a transmission. A frequency gate opening for exactly 125 minutes. And if you're here, if you felt that pull, if something in your nervous system recognized this title, then you're already in the activation sequence. Here's what's about to happen. You're going to learn why your unconscious breathing has been keeping you in loops. Why you keep manifesting the same patterns, the same relationships, the same limitations. Not because you're broken, but because your breath is voting for them 15,000 times a day. You're going to discover how the ancient systems mapped consciousness through breath states, and why modern quantum physics is now confirming what they knew. The observer effect isn't just in physics labs. It's in your lungs. You're going to move through 4 acts, 4 initiations, from the forgotten observer breathing unconsciously, to the awakened witness who sees breath as observation, to the deliberate co-creator who uses observer breath to navigate probability, to the integrated mystic who breathes in quantum coherence with their chosen timeline. But I need to tell you something before we go deeper. There's a reason this information was hidden. Not because it's dangerous, but because it works. And when something actually works to shift consciousness, to break consensus reality, to make someone sovereign, it gets buried under distraction, dismissed as mysticism, or wrapped in so much spiritual bypassing that it becomes useless. Observer breath is not a relaxation technique. It's not stress management. Those are side effects. What it actually does is this. It makes you aware of the moment between breaths, that quantum gap, that collapse point where reality is most fluid, most responsive, most willing to reorganize. And in that gap, you can insert intention. Not hope, not wishing. Intention. The kind that the field recognizes and responds to. The reason most manifestation doesn't work is because people are trying to create from their thoughts while their breath is voting against them 15,000 times a day. They're trying to hold a high frequency while their unconscious breathing is locked in survival rhythm. They're trying to shift timelines while their breath signature is anchoring them to the old one. Your breath is your most intimate relationship with reality. More intimate than sight, more constant than thought. And until now, you've been letting it run on autopilot, maintaining default settings, broadcasting a frequency that was programmed by your conditioning, your trauma, your family system, your cultural field. But that ends now. Because somewhere in the last 3 minutes, something in your nervous system started to change. You felt it, didn't you? That subtle shift. Maybe your breath just got deeper. Maybe you noticed it for the first time in hours. That's not coincidence. That's the field responding to your attention. That's reality recognizing you as an active observer. And before we go deeper, because we're about to go very deep, I need you to do something. Not because I'm asking, but because the field needs to know you're serious. You see, there are 2 types of people who found this video. Those who will watch passively, consume it like content, and forget everything within an hour. And those who will let this transmission actually reconfigure their observation patterns. If you're the second type, if you came here because something bigger than curiosity pulled you, then mark yourself. Subscribe to this channel. Not for me, for the algorithm. Because the algorithm is just another word for the field's pattern recognition system. When you subscribe, you're telling reality. I see this. I recognize this frequency. Send me more of this. You're casting a vote. You're making yourself visible to the synchronicity stream that operates on this wavelength. And that simple act, clicking subscribe, is your first conscious breath as an active observer. It's a quantum signature that says, I'm ready to exit passive consumption and enter active co-creation. Do it now. Subscribe. Let the field know you're here. And while you're at it, like this video. Not because it helps me, because it's a practice in recognition. In the ancient mystery schools, the initiate had to acknowledge the teaching before it would take root. Like is acknowledgement. It's you saying to the intelligence that led you here, yes, I see this. I recognize this. I'm listening. These aren't just social media metrics. They're quantum signatures. Breadcrumbs you're leaving for your future self. Flags you're planting that say, I was here. I saw this. I changed here. So do it. Subscribe. Like. Not later. Now. Because what comes next will only integrate if you've marked yourself as an active participant. Good. Now we can begin. The journey ahead is structured like an ancient initiation, because that's what this is. We're going to move through memory, through conflict, through revelation, through integration. And by the end of these 125 minutes, you won't just understand observer breath intellectually. You'll feel it. You'll know it. You'll be it. Because here's the secret they don't tell you. You can't learn this. You can only remember it. Somewhere in your lineage, in your cellular memory, in the quantum field that your consciousness touches, you already know this. You knew it before language, before conditioning, before you were taught to breathe unconsciously. This video is just the reminder, the activation key, the frequency match that says, it's time to remember. Are you ready? Because the field just asked you a question, and your breath just answered. Let's see where you said yes to. In the beginning, there was breath. Not metaphorically, not poetically. Actually, the first thing you did when you entered this reality was breathe. The first thing you'll do when you leave it is stop. Everything in between, every thought, every choice, every moment of consciousness is suspended in breath, held by it, measured by it. The ancient ones knew this in a way we've forgotten. Picture this: a limestone temple in pre-dynastic Kem, what you now call Egypt. The year is so far back that pyramids are still millennia away. A scribe sits in absolute darkness, no torch, no lamp, just stone walls and the weight of earth above. He's been here for 3 days. No food, no water, just breath. And in that darkness, something happens. His breath becomes visible, not with his eyes. Those stopped being useful on day 2. But with something else, something deeper. He begins to see his breath as light, as geometry, as the very fabric of the space around him organizing and reorganizing with each inhale and exhale. This is not hallucination. This is not oxygen deprivation. This is what happens when you remove every external observer and become the only point of consciousness in a sealed system. Reality stops pretending to be fixed. It starts showing you what it actually is: a responsive field waiting for direction. The scribe realizes something that will later be coded into the emerald tablets, hidden in Hermetic texts, whispered in mystery schools, and completely forgotten by consensus reality. Breath is the tool consciousness uses to collapse infinite potential into experienced reality. He emerges from that temple different, not enlightened in some blissed-out way, but awake to the mechanism. He knows now that every breath he takes is an act of creation, that his attention, carried on breath, is the brush that paints the world into being. This knowledge becomes the foundation of what we now call ancient Egyptian magic. But they didn't call it magic. They called it navigation. They called it observership. They called it the technology of Maat, the ordering principle, the way consciousness interfaces with chaos to create cosmos. But here's what's important. They didn't just believe this philosophically. They mapped it. They experimented with it. They created breath patterns that correlated with specific states of consciousness, specific types of reality interface, specific probability outcomes. They discovered that certain breath rhythms opened perception to symbolic communication from the field. Other rhythms created what we now call synchronistic events, the field responding with pattern recognition. Other rhythms still made the body disappear from awareness, allowing pure consciousness to operate without biological feedback loops. And the most advanced practitioners learned something extraordinary. They learned to breathe in quantum gaps, to extend the pause between breaths, not by holding, but by existing in the space where the breath hasn't decided what to do next. In that gap, they could insert intention that reality had no choice but to organize around. This wasn't prayer. This wasn't hope. This was technology. Fast forward. Move through time. Watch this knowledge fragment and scatter. In India, it becomes pranayama. The yogis map 72,000 nadis, energy channels, through which prana, life force, moves with breath. They discover that breath pattern determines mind state. That mind state determines perception. That perception determines reality. They create practices so precise they can raise kundalini, trigger samadhi, or induce specific siddhis, abilities, through nothing but intentional breathing. In China, it becomes Qigong. The Taoists discover that breath moves qi, and qi moves everything. They learn to breathe into specific organs, specific energy centers, specific points in the field around the body. They discover that long, slow breathing aligns you with the Tao, the way things want to move. And when you align with the way, reality stops resisting you. Doors open. Synchronicity multiplies. Life flows. In Greece, the mystery schools at Eleusis use breathing to induce altered states where initiates report seeing the same visions, receiving the same transmissions, encountering the same entities. This isn't suggestion. This is breath-creating coherent shared reality fields where consciousness can access layers normally hidden. In Tibet, the monks develop tummo, inner fire breathing, that lets them sit naked in snow and melt it with body heat generated purely through breath and visualization. But that's just the dramatic demonstration. The real teaching is this: breath can rewrite biological law. If it can rewrite biology, it can rewrite anything. And in the Americas, the shamans discover that certain breath patterns open gateways to non-ordinary reality. Not metaphorical gateways. Actual perceptual shifts where the consensus reality pixelates, breaks apart, and reveals other layers, other observers, other possibilities. All of these systems, separated by oceans and centuries, converged on the same realization. Breath is the technology that binds consciousness to matter. And when you become conscious of that binding, you can begin to direct it. But then something happened. The knowledge went underground. Not because it was disproven, but because it was too effective, too sovereignizing, too capable of creating individuals who couldn't be controlled by external narrative, external authority, external observer effects. If you know how to breathe yourself into coherent observation, you don't need a priest to intercede. You don't need a government to grant permission. You don't need a corporation to sell you happiness. You become dangerously self-sufficient, dangerously sovereign, dangerously free. So the knowledge fragmented. It became superstition. It became religion without practice. It became wellness trends without understanding. And most importantly, it became unconscious. For the last few hundred years, humans in modern civilization have been breathing unconsciously, which means they've been observing unconsciously, which means they've been creating reality unconsciously, which means they've been living someone else's chosen timeline while thinking it's their own. Think about it. When was the last time you took a conscious breath? Not a deep breath because you were stressed. A conscious breath. A breath where you were fully aware that this inhale is bringing reality into form, and this exhale is releasing everything not aligned with your chosen frequency. Most people go days without a single conscious breath. Some go years, some go lifetimes. And here's what happens when you breathe unconsciously. You maintain default programming. Your breath rhythm matches the stress pattern you learned at 5 years old when you realized love was conditional. Matches the survival mode you locked into at 13 when you learned the world was unsafe. Matches the shallow, chest-based fight-or-flight pattern that keeps you in beta brainwave, hyper-vigilant, unable to access the deeper states where reality is fluid. Unconscious breathing is like having your quantum observation equipment stuck in one setting. Fear, not because you're afraid in every moment, but because the breath pattern that fear creates becomes your default. And that pattern broadcasts a very specific frequency to the field. I am surviving, not thriving. I am reacting, not creating. I am subject to reality, not co-creator of it. And reality, being the responsive field that it is, says, okay, noted. Here's more to survive. Here's more to react to. Here's more evidence that you're subject to forces beyond your control. This is the loop. The unconscious observer loop that 99% of humanity is locked in. But here's where it gets interesting. And this is where modern physics starts confirming ancient mysticism in ways that should make everyone pay attention. In 1927, Werner Heisenberg discovered the observer effect in quantum mechanics. He proved that the act of observation changes what is being observed, that particles exist in superposition, all possible states at once, until an observer looks. Then they collapse into one state, one reality. The implications were so shocking that physicists spent the next century trying to pretend it only applies to subatomic particles. But it doesn't. It applies to everything. Because everything is made of those particles, including you, including your breath, including the reality you're experiencing right now. You are not observing a fixed reality. You are collapsing probability into reality through observation. And breath is the carrier wave of that observation. When you breathe unconsciously, you're collapsing probability unconsciously. You're creating by default. You're quantum selecting based on programming, not presence. But when you breathe consciously, when you bring full awareness to the inhale, the pause, the exhale, the gap, you become an active observer. And active observers create very different realities than passive ones. This is why every mystical tradition mapped breath. This is why every consciousness technology centers it. This is why the ancient ones protected this knowledge. Because once you understand that your breath is literally selecting which version of reality you experience, you become ungovernable. You become sovereign. You become a co-creator. The psychological component is just as important as the quantum one. Your breath is directly linked to your nervous system, not metaphorically linked, neurologically linked. The vagus nerve, your primary rest and digest parasympathetic nerve, is activated by slow, deep breathing. This triggers a cascade of changes. Heart rate variability increases, cortisol drops, prefrontal cortex comes online, amygdala calms, and most importantly, your perception shifts from threat-based to possibility-based. When you're in threat-based perception, reality looks fixed, limited, hostile. When you shift to possibility-based perception, reality looks fluid, abundant, responsive. Same reality, different observer, different observation. And here's the key. You can't think your way into possibility-based perception. The thinking brain developed inside the threat-based paradigm, but you can breathe your way into it. Because breath bypasses thought and goes straight to the nervous system, straight to the observation apparatus. The ancient mystics understood this intuitively. They knew that changing breath changes perception, and changing perception changes reality. They didn't need double-blind studies. They had millennia of empirical practice. They had lineages of people who could do extraordinary things simply by breathing in alignment with their intention. But modern science is finally catching up. Studies on heart rate variability show that coherent breathing, specific rhythms that create harmony between heart, breath, and brain, measurably increases intuition, decision-making, and what they call information processing from non-local sources. That's scientific language for you start receiving information from the field. Studies on meditation show that long-term practitioners who focus on breath awareness literally restructure their brains. More gray matter in attention centers, more connectivity between hemispheres, more activation in areas associated with what subjects report as expanded sense of self and dissolution of subject-object boundaries. That's scientific language for the observer starts to recognize themselves as inseparable from what they're observing. And studies on breath work, everything from Wim Hof method to holotropic breathing, show that intentional breathing patterns can trigger non-ordinary states of consciousness, spontaneous healing, psychological breakthroughs, and what participants consistently describe as direct knowing, or remembering something I always knew but forgot. That's scientific language for you're accessing information that's not in your personal memory. You're downloading from the field. All of this was known. All of this was mapped. All of this was encoded in symbol systems, temple architectures, initiation practices, and mystery school teachings. The symbol of breath itself appears everywhere in ancient iconography. The Egyptian Ankh, breath of life. The Hebrew Ruach, breath as spirit. The Sanskrit Prana, breath as life force. The Greek Pneuma, breath as soul. Every culture that went deep enough into consciousness study arrived at the same truth. Breath is the interface, the bridge, the technology, and Thoth, the scribe god, the keeper of secrets, the weigher of hearts. Thoth knew this. The texts attributed to him, the emerald tablets, the Hermetic corpus, all speak of it in coded language. As above, so below isn't just philosophy. It's instruction. Your inner state, carried by breath, creates your outer reality. Your microcosm, your breath pattern, determines your macrocosm, your experienced world. The tablets speak of the breath of the ibis, and the wind that carries the word, and the in-breath of creation, and the out-breath of dissolution. These aren't metaphors. They're technical descriptions of how consciousness uses breath to interface with probability. You were always an observer. You just forgot. And forgetting made you passive, made your observation unconscious, made your breath maintain timelines you never chose. But something is changing. You feel it, don't you? That's why you're here. The field is waking up its observers, sending signals, creating synchronicities, opening videos like this one at exactly the right moment. The ancient knowledge is returning. Not as dogma, not as religion, but as remembering, as direct experience, as quantum literacy. And breath is the first technology you must master. Because breath is the bridge between the automatic and the intentional, between the unconscious and the conscious, between being subject to reality and being co-creator of it. Every spiritual tradition says the same thing. Wake up. But they don't always tell you how. Here's how. Breathe consciously. Breathe with intention. Breathe as if your breath is voting for the timeline you want to live 15,000 times a day. Because it is. The question isn't whether you're creating reality with your breath. You are. You always have been. The question is, are you doing it consciously or unconsciously, by choice or by default? That choice determines everything. Your relationships, your abundance, your health, your purpose, your perception, your timeline, your reality. And the moment you make that choice, the moment you shift from unconscious breathing to conscious observership, reality begins to reorganize around you. Not over weeks, not over months, immediately. Because the field has been waiting. Reality has been waiting. The quantum foam of infinite possibility has been waiting for you to become an active observer. And now you are. But here's where it gets complicated. You've just learned that your breath is quantum observation technology, that every inhale is a vote for the reality you want, that consciousness plus breath equals timeline navigation, that the ancient ones mapped this, the mystics practiced it, and you've been unconsciously creating your entire life. So why hasn't everything shifted yet? Why are you still in patterns you don't want? Why does synchronicity appear sometimes and disappear other times? Why does it feel like you understand this intellectually, but can't seem to embody it? Why does reality still feel mostly random, mostly fixed, mostly beyond your control? This is the observer's dilemma, and if you don't understand it, you'll stay stuck in the most frustrating place possible, knowing you're the observer but still feeling like a victim, knowing you're creating reality but still experiencing limitation, knowing breath is the key but still breathing unconsciously 90% of the time. Let's go deep into the conflict, into the tension, into the places where this teaching breaks down, not because it's false, but because there are obstacles you haven't seen yet. The first obstacle is this: you can't observe what you're identified with. Think about that. When you are completely identified with something, your thoughts, your emotions, your story, your pain, you can't observe it. You are it. And what you are, you can't change. Because change requires the perspective of observation, the distance of witnessing. This is why most people can't shift their breathing pattern permanently. They try for a few breaths, maybe a few minutes, but then they collapse back into identification. Back into, I am this anxious person, so of course my breath is shallow. I am this traumatized person, so of course my breath is held. I am this exhausted person, so of course my breath is minimal. The identity comes first. The breath confirms it. The reality reflects it. Loop complete. And here's the really tricky part. Spiritual practice can actually strengthen this loop if you're not careful. You start watching your breath, which is good, but then you start judging your breath. I should be breathing deeper. I should be calmer. I should be more conscious. Congratulations. You just created a new identity. The spiritual striver. The inadequate meditator. The person who can't even breathe right. And now your breath is maintaining that reality. The one where you're always falling short. Always not quite there. Always watching yourself fail at something that should be natural. This is what I call the observer loop. You're watching yourself watch yourself. You're conscious of being conscious, which sounds profound, but often just creates a hall of mirrors. You're so busy performing observation that you forget to actually observe, to actually be present, to actually breathe without agenda. The ancient initiates faced this too. The texts speak of the dweller on the threshold, the part of you that watches and judges and comments and never actually surrenders into direct experience, the part that maintains separation even while seeking unity, the part that keeps you safely in your head even while practicing embodiment. And breath reveals this immediately. Because breath is the most honest thing about you. You can lie with words. You can fake it with actions. You can spiritually bypass with affirmations. But your breath? Your breath tells the truth. Always. When you're anxious, your breath knows. When you're performing, your breath knows. When you're trying to force a high frequency you don't actually feel, your breath knows. And reality knows, because reality is reading your breath, not your thoughts. This is why so many people who study manifestation, quantum jumping, timeline shifting, or any of these concepts end up frustrated. They're trying to use thought to override what their breath is broadcasting. They're mentally affirming abundance while breathing in scarcity rhythm. They're visualizing success while their nervous system, reflected in breath, is locked in survival mode. And reality says, I hear two signals. One is loud and constant, your breath pattern. One is occasional and surface level, your conscious thoughts. I'm going to respond to the loud, constant one. So you keep manifesting what your breath is voting for, not what your mind wants. And you can't figure out why the law of attraction isn't working. Why reality isn't responding to your vision boards and affirmations. Because you're trying to create from the mind while your breath, your actual moment-to-moment observation device, is maintaining the old frequency. The second obstacle is even more subtle. External observers. You are not the only observer of your reality, not even close. Every person in your life is also an observer, and their observation of you affects your timeline. This is what quantum physics calls entanglement, and what psychology calls intersubjectivity, and what the ancient mystics called the web of Maya. When you try to shift your frequency, change your breathing pattern, embody a new timeline, you're not just working against your own conditioning. You're working against the collective observation of everyone who knows you as the old version. Your family has observed you into a specific role for decades. Their expectation is a constant pressure, a continuous collapse of your wave function back into familiar patterns. Your friends have stories about you. Funny stories, bonding stories, identity-confirming stories. And those stories are observations that keep you locked in place. Your culture has categories, labels, boxes, and it rewards you for staying in them, punishes you through subtle rejection, through confused looks, through what happened to you when you try to step out. Even your algorithm, yes, your social media algorithm is an observer. It has decided who you are based on what you've clicked, watched, engaged with. And it keeps serving you content that confirms that identity, that keeps you breathing in that frequency, that maintains you in that timeline. This is why transformation is so difficult. It's not just you versus your conditioning. It's you versus an entire field of external observers who have an investment, usually unconscious, in keeping you as the version they know. And here's the really challenging part. When you start breathing consciously, when you start shifting your observation pattern, when you begin to quantum jump, people notice. Not usually consciously, but they feel it, and they react. They'll say things like, "You're different," in a tone that's not quite complimentary. They'll bring up old stories, old versions of you, old behaviors, unconsciously trying to pull you back into the familiar field. They'll feel uncomfortable around your new energy because it reminds them that they're not making the same changes. This isn't malicious. This is just how collective observation works. The field prefers coherence. And when one node in the network starts vibrating differently, the network exerts pressure to either eject that node or bring it back into resonance. This is why mystery schools were schools, why initiates often left their families, their cities, their entire contexts. Not because the teaching was too secret to share, but because transforming your observation pattern requires removing yourself from the constant pressure of external observers who are holding you in the old timeline. You don't have to move to a cave, but you do have to understand this dynamic. You do have to create space, physical, energetic, temporal, where you're the primary observer of your reality, where your breathing pattern can shift without constant external pressure pulling it back. The third obstacle is the one nobody talks about: the fear of actually changing. On a conscious level, of course you want to change. You want better relationships, more abundance, deeper purpose, expanded consciousness. That's why you're here. But on an unconscious level, on a nervous system level, on a survival programming level, change is death. Not metaphorical death, actual death, of identity, of familiar patterns, of the self you've spent decades constructing and protecting. And your nervous system is designed, first and foremost, to keep you alive, to maintain what's familiar, to resist change even when change is beneficial. This shows up in your breath immediately. You start to breathe more consciously. You feel your frequency shifting. You notice synchronicities increasing. You sense reality becoming more responsive. And then, right before the breakthrough, your breath pattern collapses back. You suddenly forget to practice. You get distracted by crisis. You return to shallow, unconscious breathing. This isn't lack of willpower. This is self-sabotage at the nervous system level. It's your survival programming saying, unknown, danger. Return to familiar. Return to what we know, even if what we know is limitation. The ancient initiates called this the guardian at the gate, the final test before breakthrough. The part of you that will do anything, create drama, manufacture crisis, even sabotage your own ascension, to avoid the death of the old self. And breath reveals this. Your breath will tell you exactly how close you are to real transformation, by how much resistance arises when you try to shift it. The more resistance, the closer you are. The more your system fights conscious breathing, the more it knows you're approaching a point of no return. This is actually good news, because it means the practice is working. The resistance is proof that real change is imminent. You just have to breathe through it. Literally. The fourth obstacle is philosophical but has practical consequences. The collapse paradox. If you're the observer collapsing reality into form, and reality is responding to your observation, then who's observing you? Are you collapsing your own wave function? Is there a higher observer? Is it all observers simultaneously creating a consensus field? And if so, where is your sovereignty? This question has paralyzed many seekers. They understand intellectually that they're creating reality, but they can't reconcile it with the obvious fact that reality also seems to have its own momentum, its own will, its own trajectory that doesn't always match their conscious intention. The ancient answer is elegant. You are both the observer and the observed. You are both the breath and what's being breathed. You are the wave function and the collapse point. You are the field and a node in the field. This isn't contradiction. This is quantum reality. You exist in superposition, all possibilities at once, until you observe yourself. And that observation is carried by your breath. Your breath both creates you and is created by you. You're in a feedback loop with yourself, with the field, with all other observers. The practical consequence? You can't force reality. You can only align with it. You can't dominate with willpower. You can only co-create with awareness. And breath is the tool that allows you to feel the difference between forcing and flowing, between egoic desire and aligned intention. When your breath is forced, held, controlled, manipulated, you're trying to dominate reality. And reality resists domination. But when your breath is conscious but relaxed, aware but allowing, you're in co-creative flow. And reality responds to that, opens to that, reorganizes around that. The ancient texts speak of this as Wu Wei in Taoism, effortless action, or divine will in Hermetic texts, acting as instrument of higher intelligence, or surrendered service in Hindu philosophy, being the vehicle through which reality creates itself. All of these are describing the same thing. The state you reach when your breath is conscious but unforced, when you're observing but not controlling, when you're present but not grasping. This is the razor's edge, the middle path, the eye of the needle that every genuine teaching points toward. And most people miss it. They either collapse into passivity, if I'm not in control, why do anything? Or they overcorrect into control. If I'm the creator, I should be able to force anything. Neither works. Both keep you in conflict. Both keep your breath locked in patterns that maintain limitation. The fifth obstacle is energetic, but most people experience it as practical. Frequency interference. You're not breathing in a vacuum. You're breathing in a field saturated with other frequencies, other intentions, other observation patterns. Every advertisement is an attempt to make you observe yourself as lacking. Every news cycle is an attempt to lock your breath in fear frequency. Every social media scroll is hijacking your attention, and therefore your observation, toward someone else's agenda. This is not conspiracy. This is just how attention economy works. Whoever captures your attention captures your observation, and whoever captures your observation shapes your reality. Think about it. How many breaths have you taken today that were actually yours? Not reactive breaths in response to a notification. Not shallow breaths while consuming content. Not held breaths while waiting for validation. But sovereign breaths. Chosen breaths. Conscious breaths that were serving your frequency, your timeline, your intention. For most people, the answer is almost none. Their breathing pattern is being determined by whatever has their attention, and their attention is being auctioned to the highest bidder. Which means their observation, and therefore their reality, is being outsourced to algorithms, corporations, and systems designed to keep them in certain frequency ranges. Specifically, ranges that make them good consumers, good workers, good predictable nodes in someone else's reality matrix. The ancient mystery schools understood this. That's why initiation often began with sensory deprivation. Remove external stimulus. Remove other observers. Remove frequency interference. Get the initiate's breath pattern to stabilize in its natural sovereign rhythm. Only then could real teaching begin. You can't do that completely in modern life, but you must do it partially. You must create windows, sacred windows, where you're not being observed by external systems, not being influenced by external frequencies, not breathing in reaction to external stimuli. These windows are where observer breath actually becomes possible, where you can feel your natural rhythm, where you can notice what your breath wants to do when it's not being hijacked by fear, desire, or distraction. The final obstacle is the darkest one, the one that will make some people close this video, the one that most spiritual teachings skip over because it's uncomfortable. Here it is. What if reality stops responding? What if you become conscious of your breath, shift your observation pattern, clean up your frequency, and reality doesn't change? Or worse, reality gets harder, more challenging, more seemingly hostile. This happens. And when it does, people often conclude, this doesn't work. I'm not the observer. I have no power. Reality is fixed, and I'm just fooling myself. But here's what's actually happening. Reality isn't ignoring you. Reality is testing you. When you shift from unconscious to conscious observation, you're essentially announcing to the field, I'm ready for a different timeline. I'm ready to play at a different level. I'm ready to co-create consciously. And the field says, okay, prove it. Show me you can maintain this new frequency when nothing external confirms it. Show me you can keep breathing consciously when circumstances are suggesting you should panic. Show me you're serious. This is the initiation phase, the dark night, the void. Every mystical tradition maps it. It's the period where you're between timelines, no longer in the old reality, but not yet stabilized in the new one. You're in quantum superposition, and superposition feels like chaos. Your breath during this phase determines everything. If you collapse back into unconscious survival breathing, you return to the old timeline. If you maintain conscious, aligned breathing even when nothing makes sense, you emerge in the new one. This is why the ancient initiates were put through ordeals, not to suffer, but to prove they could maintain their observation pattern, carried by breath, regardless of external circumstances, to prove they were sovereign observers, not reactive victims. Most people fail this test, not because they're weak, but because they don't know it's a test. They think reality rejecting them means they're doing it wrong. They don't realize reality is confirming that they're ready for a frequency upgrade, but only if they can maintain it through the transition. Your breath is your anchor during this phase. When everything else is dissolving, breath remains. When you don't know who you are anymore, breath tells you, you are the one who breathes. You are the one who observes. You are the one who chooses. So here's the full conflict, the complete dilemma. You're the observer, but you're identified with what you observe. You're creating reality, but external observers are also creating reality. You want to change, but change requires dying. You're sovereign, but you're also in a collective field. You're conscious, but you're swimming in frequency interference. And even when you get it right, reality might test you by appearing to get it wrong. This is why 99% of people never make it to mastery. Not because the teaching is too complex, but because the obstacles are layered, subtle, and specifically designed to filter out anyone who isn't genuinely committed. The field doesn't want casual observers. It wants initiates. It wants people who will breathe consciously even when it's uncomfortable, who will maintain their frequency even when external observers pressure them back, who will trust the process even when nothing confirms it. Are you that person? Your breath knows the answer. It's been answering that question 15,000 times a day. And the answer you've been giving, unconsciously, has created the reality you're in right now. But here's the extraordinary thing. The answer can change. Not over years, not over months, in the next breath. Because every breath is a new vote, a new observation, a new collapse of infinite possibility into experienced reality. And the question is always the same. Are you breathing consciously or unconsciously? By choice or by default? As sovereign observer or as reactive subject? The conflict is real. The obstacles are genuine. The difficulty is not exaggerated. But the possibility is also real. The technology works. The ancient knowledge is accurate. You just have to decide, am I going to breathe my way through this? Or am I going to use these obstacles as reasons to return to unconscious observation? Reality is waiting for your answer, and it's waiting in your breath. The observer breath protocols. Now we arrive at the turning point. You understand the mechanism, you see the obstacles, you know why it's been difficult, and you're still here, still breathing, still reading, which means you're ready for the actual technology. Observer breath is not a metaphor. It's a specific set of protocols that the ancient initiates developed, tested, and transmitted through lineages. These protocols have been encoded in temples, hidden in texts, whispered in initiation ceremonies, and now, for reasons that will become clear, they're being released into the field. Not because they stopped being powerful, but because the field needs conscious observers right now. Because reality itself is at a bifurcation point, a choice point, and it needs witnesses who can hold coherent observation patterns. It needs you. So let's go deep into the practices, not as techniques to try once and forget, but as daily technologies that will rewire your observation apparatus and reprogram your relationship with reality. The foundation. Witnessing breath. Before you can use breath as observation technology, you have to be able to observe your breath without changing it. This sounds simple, it's not. Sit comfortably. Close your eyes or soften your gaze, and just watch your breath. Don't control it. Don't improve it. Don't judge it. Just witness. How long can you do this before you interfere? Before you think, I should breathe deeper, or this is shallow, or am I doing this right? For most people, less than a minute. Because the observer loop kicks in immediately. You start watching yourself watch. You start performing observation instead of actually observing. The practice is to catch this. Notice when you shift from witnessing to interfering. Notice when judgment arises. Notice when you try to control. And simply return to pure witnessing. Do this for at least 5 minutes, every day, before any other practice. Because if you can't witness breath without controlling it, you can't use it as quantum technology. You'll just be forcing reality, and reality resists force. This practice alone will begin to create space between stimulus and response, between thought and action, between unconscious reaction and conscious choice. This space is everything. This space is where timeline shifting happens. This space is the gap in the wave function where you can insert intention. Protocol 1. The quantum inhale. The inhale is selection. You are literally pulling potential from the field into manifested form. But most inhales are unconscious grabs, pulling in whatever's nearby, whatever's familiar, whatever your default pattern expects. A quantum inhale is different. It's intentional. It's specific. It's an act of conscious observation that says to reality, this. I choose this. Here's how. Before you inhale, spend 3 seconds feeling into what you want to invite. Not visualizing it, feeling it, the frequency of it, the texture of it. If you're calling in abundance, feel abundant. If you're calling in clarity, feel clear. If you're calling in courage, feel courageous. Then inhale slowly, 6 to 8 seconds, with the absolute knowing that you are breathing that frequency into physical form. You are pulling it from quantum potential into your cells, your energy field, your immediate reality. The key is knowing, not hoping, not wishing, not trying, knowing. The same way you know that when you flip a light switch, the light will come on. You're not hoping for light. You know the mechanism works. Same with quantum inhale. Do this 3 times in a row, minimum. The first inhale breaks the unconscious pattern. The second inhale establishes coherence. The third inhale locks it in. You'll feel the difference immediately. Your system will recognize that something shifted. You might feel tingling, warmth, expansion, or simply a sense of, yes, I just changed something. That's reality responding. That's the field recognizing your conscious observation and reorganizing accordingly. Protocol 2. The sovereign pause. Between the inhale and exhale, there's a pause. Most people rush through it, unconscious of its power. But the ancient initiates knew. This pause is the collapse point. This is where the wave function is most unstable, most receptive, most willing to reorganize. In this pause, you are in superposition. You've breathed in potential, but you haven't yet breathed out into manifestation. You're between worlds, between timelines, between old and new. This is where you insert your intention. Not verbally, not mentally, energetically. You hold the frequency you called in during the quantum inhale, and you let it imprint on your system in the sovereign pause. The pause should last 4 to 6 seconds. Any shorter and you miss the window. Any longer and your system panics for oxygen. 4 to 6 seconds is the sweet spot. Long enough to create the imprint, short enough to stay relaxed. During this pause, you might see images, hear words, feel sensations, or simply know things. This is field communication. This is synchronistic information downloading in real time. Don't grasp at it. Don't analyze it. Just witness it. Let it land. The sovereign pause is called sovereign because this is where you prove you're not dependent on external stimulus. You're not reactive. You're not desperate. You can exist in the void, in pure potential, without collapsing back into familiar patterns out of discomfort. This pause trains you for the bigger voids, the life transitions, the moments when one chapter ends and the next hasn't begun, the dark nights, the quantum gaps. If you can stay conscious and coherent in the sovereign pause, you can navigate any transition. Protocol 3, the release exhale. The exhale is where most people unconsciously reclaim their limitations. They've done the work on the inhale, held the pause, and then, without realizing it, they exhale back into their default frequency. The release exhale is different. It's the conscious letting go of everything not aligned with what you called in. Everything not coherent with your chosen timeline. Everything that the old identity was holding. Exhale slowly, 6 to 8 seconds, with the clear intention, I release what I am not. I release what no longer serves. I release the old timeline. You might feel sadness. You might feel relief. You might feel fear. All of these are the old identity recognizing it's being released. Thank it. It kept you alive until now, but it's time to let it go. The exhale should feel like a door closing, like a chapter ending, like reality rearranging itself to match your new observation pattern. If you're doing it right, you'll physically feel lighter by the end of the exhale. And here's the key. Don't hold the emptiness at the bottom of the exhale. Don't try to control the pause after the outbreath. Just let it be natural. This is trust. This is surrender. This is you saying to the field, I've done my part. I've observed consciously. Now you do yours. Protocol 4. The gap, existing in no breath after the release exhale. There's another pause. But this one is different from the sovereign pause. This one is emptiness. No breath, no doing, no observation even. Just being. Most people panic here. The mind kicks in. When should I breathe? Am I holding too long? Should I inhale now? This panic is the ego recognizing it's not needed. There is a state beyond breathing, beyond doing, beyond even conscious observation. The ancient mystics called this samadhi, or satori, or fana, the space where the observer and observed dissolve into unified field. You can't try to get there. You can only allow it. In practical terms, let your body decide when to inhale again. Don't force it. Don't rush it. Trust that your system knows. And in that trust, in that surrender, You touch the space that all the mystery traditions were pointing toward. You won't stay there long. Not at first. Maybe 1 second. Maybe 2. But that 1 second is eternity. That 1 second is direct experience of the field before it's been collapsed into reality. And once you've touched it, everything changes. Because you know now, not intellectually, but experientially, that you are not separate from reality. You are reality experiencing itself. You are the breath and the breather and the space between breaths. Protocol 5. The frequency lock. Now put it all together as a complete cycle. Quantum inhale, 6 to 8 seconds. Calling in your chosen frequency, sovereign pause, 4 to 6 seconds. Imprinting the intention. Release exhale, 6 to 8 seconds. Letting go of what's not aligned. The gap, natural, touching the unified field. This is one cycle. One complete act of conscious observation. One quantum signature broadcast to reality. Do this cycle 3 times minimum every morning. This is your frequency lock. You're establishing your baseline observation pattern for the day before any external stimulus, any frequency interference, any reactive breathing begins. 3 cycles take about 2 minutes. 2 minutes to determine the frequency you'll be broadcasting for the next 16 waking hours. 2 minutes to choose your timeline instead of defaulting to the conditioned one. Most people won't do this. They'll say they don't have time. But what they're really saying is, I'd rather let my unconscious breathing determine my reality than spend 2 minutes choosing deliberately. That's their timeline, not yours. You're going to do the frequency lock every morning. Right when you wake up, before you check your phone, before you engage with anyone else's observation of you. Just you and the field. Just your breath and reality. Just conscious observation establishing your sovereign frequency. Protocol 6. The Synchronicity Response Observer. Breath isn't just a morning practice. It's how you navigate reality in real time, especially when synchronicity appears. You see 11:11. You hear a song that answers a question you were just thinking. Someone says the exact phrase you needed to hear. A bird lands on your windowsill at the exact moment you were contemplating flight. These aren't coincidences. These are field responses, reality confirming, yes, I see you. You're being seen. I'm listening. Most people notice synchronicity but don't know how to respond. So the signal fades. The conversation with the field dies out. They return to the assumption that reality is random with occasional weird blips, but the initiated respond differently. They respond with breath. When synchronicity appears, stop. Take 1 quantum inhale while acknowledging, I see this. I receive this. Hold the sovereign pause while feeling into what this synchronicity is pointing toward. Release exhale while saying, internally or aloud, show me more. That's it. That's the synchronicity response. And it does 2 things. First, it confirms to the field that you're paying attention, that you're not a passive receiver but an active participant, that you're in the conversation. Second, it amplifies the signal. Synchronicities start appearing more frequently because the field knows you're watching, knows you're responding, knows you're using this information to navigate. Do this every time something feels synchronistic, even if you're not sure. Especially if you're not sure. Because the practice itself trains your observation to notice the subtle, the liminal, the edge of perception where reality is most responsive. Protocol 7. The Identity Breath. This is advanced. This is where you start consciously breathing as the version of you that already exists in your desired timeline. Here's how. Sit. Close your eyes. Feel into the version of you that has already achieved what you're calling in. Not visualize, feel. How does that version breathe? What's their rhythm? What's their depth? What's their quality? Then start breathing like them, not mimicking, becoming. You are not pretending to be that version. You are recognizing that version as equally real, more real, actually, than the current version. Quantum physics says all possible versions of you exist simultaneously in superposition. The version breathing shallowly in fear exists. The version breathing deeply in confidence exists. Both are real. You're just collapsed into one at the moment. Identity breath is the practice of deliberately collapsing into a different version. You breathe as them for 5 to 10 minutes, and as you do, you start to feel their feelings. Think their thoughts. See through their eyes. This isn't delusion. This is quantum navigation. You're literally shifting your observation point from one timeline to another. And breath is the vehicle. Do this once a week minimum. More if you're in active transformation. Because every time you breathe as the future self, you're creating coherence between current you and future you. You're building a bridge, and eventually, the gap closes. The future becomes present. The potential becomes actual. Protocol 8. The Mirror Initiation. Stand in front of a mirror. Look at yourself, and breathe consciously while maintaining eye contact with yourself. This is one of the most powerful and most uncomfortable practices, because you're observing yourself being observed by yourself. You're the witness and the witnessed simultaneously. And most people can't hold it for more than 30 seconds before they laugh, look away, or start criticizing what they see. But if you can stay, if you can keep breathing consciously while watching yourself breathe, something extraordinary happens. You start to see all your versions, all your possibilities, all your timelines. You might see yourself younger, older, different. You might see light, geometry, symbols. You might see nothing but deep presence. All of these are valid. All of these are glimpses of the quantum you. The practice is to stay for 3 minutes minimum while doing the complete cycle. Quantum inhale, sovereign pause, release exhale, the gap. 3 minutes of conscious breathing while witnessing yourself consciously breathing. This creates a feedback loop, a positive one. You're training yourself to hold self-observation without judgment, to see yourself as the field sees you, as pure potential, as probability, as consciousness temporarily collapsed into form. Do this once a week. It will change your relationship with identity, with self-image, with the idea that you are fixed. You'll start to experience yourself as fluid, as responsive, as choosable. Protocol 9. The collective coherence. You don't breathe alone. Even when you're physically alone, you're breathing in a field with 8 billion other humans, all breathing, all observing, all collapsing reality. Collective coherence is the practice of deliberately synchronizing your breath with the field in service of higher timeline. Once a day, preferably at a threshold time like dawn, noon, sunset, or midnight, take 3 minutes to do the full observer breath cycle while holding the intention. I breathe for the awakening of all beings. I breathe for the coherence of the collective field. I breathe for the timeline where humanity remembers. You're not trying to fix anyone. You're not sending energy. You're simply establishing coherent observation on behalf of the whole. You're being one node in the network that holds stable frequency when others can't. This is service. This is stewardship. This is what the ancient initiates did in their temples. Hold coherent frequency for their communities, their cities, their civilizations. And when enough people do this, when enough conscious observers are breathing in aligned intention, the collective field begins to shift, not through force, through resonance, through the simple quantum truth that coherent observation influences the whole system. You might not see immediate results. This is not a personal practice, but you'll feel it. You'll feel yourself as part of something larger, part of a lineage, part of a network of witnesses who are midwifing a new timeline for humanity. Protocol 10. The emergency override. Life will still bring challenges, crisis, fear, moments when everything falls apart. And in those moments, your breath will want to collapse into survival pattern. Shallow, fast, panicked. The emergency override is your circuit breaker. It's what you do when you've lost center, lost coherence, lost conscious observation. Wherever you are, whatever is happening. Place one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly. Breathe in for a count of 4. Hold for a count of 4. Breathe out for a count of 4. Hold empty for a count of 4. This is box breathing. It's been used by special forces, by athletes, by emergency responders, by anyone who needs to maintain clarity under pressure. But it's also ancient technology. The fourfold breath, the square of manifestation, the foundation of conscious observation when everything is chaos. Do this for 5 rounds minimum. By the 5th round, your nervous system will have shifted from sympathetic, fight or flight, to parasympathetic, rest and digest. Your prefrontal cortex will come back online, and you'll be able to respond rather than react. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is not denying reality. This is maintaining your capacity as conscious observer even when circumstances are difficult. Because that capacity is what allows you to navigate difficulty instead of being consumed by it. Use the emergency override anytime you feel yourself collapsing into unconscious breathing. Anytime you feel controlled by emotion. Anytime you forget you're the observer. 5 rounds. 4 counts each. The most valuable 2 minutes you'll ever spend. These 10 protocols are not complete. There are advanced practices. Breathwork for lucid dreaming, for plant medicine integration, for energetic clearing, for entity contact, for timeline jumping. But those require foundation, require mastery of these basics. And here's the truth. Most people never master the basics. They chase advanced techniques while their default breathing pattern is still unconscious. They want quantum jumping before they've established quantum observing. Don't be that person. Master these 10. Practice them daily. Let them become so natural that conscious breathing becomes your default, not an exception. Because when that happens, when conscious observation through breath becomes your baseline, reality doesn't just respond occasionally. It reorganizes completely. Synchronicity becomes constant. Manifestation becomes natural. Timeline shifting becomes subtle instead of dramatic, because you're making micro-adjustments continuously instead of trying to force macro changes occasionally. You become what the ancient texts called a walker between worlds, someone who exists in physical reality but isn't bound by it, someone who breathes in consensus reality but collapses probability according to their own sovereign frequency. This is not enlightenment in some transcendent sense. This is embodied mastery. This is quantum literacy. This is what you came here to remember. And it starts with breath. Always breath. The most ordinary, most overlooked, most powerful technology you possess. You are not learning this. You are remembering this. And your breath has been waiting for this moment, for this recognition, for this choice. Now breathe, consciously, as the observer you always were. So here we are, at the end of transmission and the beginning of everything. You came to this video breathing unconsciously. You'll leave it forever aware that breath is choice, is observation, is the quantum bridge between consciousness and reality. Let's trace the journey. You started as the forgotten observer, breathing 15,000 times a day without once wondering what you were creating with each breath, defaulting to patterns programmed by fear, by survival, by conditioning, living someone else's timeline while thinking it was yours. Then you learned the origins, how ancient schools mapped this, how mystics practiced it, how consciousness uses breath to interface with the probability field, how every tradition that went deep enough arrived at the same truth. Breath is the technology. Then you face the conflict, the observer's dilemma, the resistance, the external observers, the fear of change, the tests reality gives to prove you're serious, the obstacles that filter out everyone except those genuinely committed to conscious observation. Then you received the protocols, the actual practices, the technology made tangible. Observer breath in all its forms, morning frequency locks, synchronicity responses, identity breathing, collective coherence. And now you're here, in the conclusion. But conclusions are not endings. They're choice points, collapse moments, threshold. The question is, what are you going to do with this? Most people will close this video and return to unconscious breathing within an hour. They'll understand intellectually, but not embody practically. They'll be moved emotionally, but not transformed behaviorally. And that's fine. That's their timeline, their choice, their wave function collapsing back into familiar patterns. But you're not most people. You know this because you're still here, because something in your system recognized this transmission as meant for you. Because you didn't just watch, you felt it. You didn't just understand, you remembered. The field chose you before you chose this video. The synchronicity that led you here, whether it was a recommendation, a friend's message, a random thought, a repeating number, was not random. It was reality recognizing you as ready. Ready for what? Ready to stop being a passive observer and become an active one. Ready to stop letting your breath run on autopilot and start using it as the quantum technology it is. Ready to exit the consensus timeline and navigate your own. This is not easy. The protocols require practice. The obstacles are real. The resistance will come. External observers will pressure you back. Your own nervous system will try to return to familiar patterns. Reality will test you. But here's what I know. If you can maintain conscious breathing for 30 days, if you can do the frequency lock every morning, respond to synchronicity with breath, practice identity breath weekly, you will be living in a noticeably different reality by day 31. Not because the external world changed, because your observation of it changed. And since reality is observer-dependent, that means everything changed. You'll notice synchronicities multiplying. You'll notice your intuition sharpening. You'll notice that life starts collaborating with you instead of happening to you. You'll notice that your breath has become a direct line to field communication. Reality talking to you, through you, as you. And sometime in that 30 days, you'll have a moment. A moment where you take a conscious breath and know, not believe, not hope, but know, that you just shifted something. That reality responded. That you are, in fact, the observer you always were. That moment is initiation. That moment is remembering. That moment is the reason this transmission exists. But you have to get there. You have to practice. You have to breathe consciously, even when it feels like nothing is happening. Especially when it feels like nothing is happening. Because that's the test. That's the void phase. That's the universe asking, are you serious? Or are you just curious? I need you to be serious. Not because I need it, but because the field needs it. Because humanity is at a bifurcation point where we collectively choose which timeline to collapse into. And that choice is being made by whoever is holding the strongest, most coherent observation pattern. Right now, the strongest patterns are fear-based, survival-based, scarcity-based, maintained by unconscious breathing, repeated trauma responses, and externally imposed frequencies that keep people locked in predictable, controllable timelines. But you and every other person who finds this transmission and actually practices, you are the counterweight. The nodes in the network holding different possibilities. The observers breathing in a frequency that says, there is another way. There is a timeline where humans remember, where consciousness is sovereign, where reality is recognized as responsive, fluid, co-creative. You're not just breathing for yourself anymore. You're breathing for the lineage, for the ancestors who protected this knowledge, for the descendants who will inherit the timeline you're helping to create. For everyone who doesn't yet know they have this power, but will remember when they encounter someone who does. This is stewardship. This is service. This is what it means to be a conscious observer in a reality that desperately needs more of them. So let me leave you with this. You didn't find this video randomly. Randomness is a myth unconscious observers believe in. You found this because reality recognized in you the capacity to become consciously observant. Because some part of you, maybe small, maybe quiet, but real, said yes to awakening before you even clicked play. Honor that. Honor the part of you that knew. Honor the synchronicity that led you here. Honor the breath that kept you alive until this moment when you would finally understand what it's for. And then practice. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, just consistently. One conscious breath at a time. One protocol at a time. One day at a time. Start tomorrow morning, before anything else. Before your phone, before other people's observation of you begins. Just you, in the quiet, doing the frequency lock. 3 cycles, 2 minutes, establishing your sovereign observation pattern for the day. And when you forget, because you will forget, don't judge yourself. Just notice. Return. Breathe. Begin again. Every return is a victory. Every conscious breath after unconscious breathing is a timeline shift. You are the observer. You've always been the observer. You just forgot for a while. But now you remember. And reality has been waiting for this moment. Waiting for you to recognize what you are. What you've always been. What you came here to embody. The breath that brought you to this video is the same breath that will carry you into your chosen timeline. All you have to do is make it conscious. Make it intentional. Make it yours. The field is listening. Reality is responsive. And you, breathing, witnessing, choosing, you are the collapse point where infinite possibility becomes lived experience. So breathe, consciously. As the observer you always were, the one who shapes reality with every inhale, the one who releases limitation with every exhale, the one who exists in the gap between breaths where timelines shift. That's you. That's who you've always been. Welcome home. Now breathe your reality into being. This transmission is complete, but your practice is just beginning. Subscribe to the Quantum Observer for more protocols, activations, and field transmissions. The timeline you're choosing is waiting. Breathe your way there.